Andrew was silent in response to the journalist's question. Soon, similar voices arose from the audience.
I work in accounting, and this is clearly fraud. It's definitely tax evasion.
Faced with these accusations, Andrew's patience finally snapped.
Shut up. None of this concerns you. I didn't do anything. This can't be evidence.
Andrew's outburst silenced the crowd. In the midst of this, I took out my mobile phone. Then, I played a certain audio recording. Listen up. Mark the inventory as less.
But that would mean... Don't argue with me. You can't escape this now.
The voices of Violet and Andrew echoed in the venue. People from afar also started to gather closer. The recording continued. What about today's pre-order receipts? I destroyed them. They were cash payments, convenient for fudging the sales. That's again?
Shut up. If we paid taxes properly, we'd never make any money.
The recording ended with those words from Andrew. I glanced and saw Andrew's face had turned ashen.
This recording was in a pendant Violet had. It was an IC recorder. That heart-shaped one?
Yes.
It was an IC recorder. Violet left it as irrefutable evidence.
Andrew crumbled. Then, a security guard arrived with a police officer. The officer looked at Andrew and me, then asked Andrew, who was almost collapsing.
I've heard quite a bit. Is it true that you were evading taxes? No. That is... We'll ask you more thoroughly at the police station. For now, would you please come with us?
The officer spoke calmly to Andrew. But his eyes were not kind. I handed the officer Mr. Carter's testimony. Then I told him about Violet's suicide. I understand. We'll investigate that as well, the officer said, casting a stern glance at Andrew. But Andrew had no strength left to argue. Afterward, Andrew was arrested on charges of tax evasion and other offenses. Violet's case was also thoroughly investigated. However, it wasn't that Andrew directly caused Violet's death. In the end, he was only charged with assault for Violet's case. Nevertheless, the arrest had a significant impact. In just a few months, Andrew's father's confectionery company was driven into bankruptcy. Naturally, all the operating stores were closed. The shop where Violet worked became a rented space. I don't know what will happen to Andrew's sentencing, but I hope he reflects on his actions. After Andrew was taken away by the police, Wendy distributed the chocolates to the people at the venue. These chocolates were designed by my best friend. While handing them out, I wished Violet could have seen this. Especially the customers smiling as they tasted the chocolates. Violet would have loved to see that. Tears welled up in my eyes. But I had no time to cry. Because the sale of those chocolates had been decided. We want to name the product Violet. Because it's a light violet color, and most importantly, it was Violet's idea. Wendy spoke with a smile. Then she added, "Would you write the product tag for us? We want to display it with Violet's photo at the store." So, for the first time in my life, I started working on creating a store display tag. I hope Violet would like it. Speaking to Violet's smiling photo, I reached for a light purple-colored pencil. "Are you sure it's okay to accept this?" I asked the woman in front of me. She responded and nodded. With a charming smile, seemingly filled with happiness. That made sense. She had submitted a birth certificate. Although probably she had gone through a tough childbirth, this young woman seemed to savor the joy of a new family and resolve of motherhood in her heart. I accepted the birth certificate because I am a civil servant for working here. I carefully checked the document if there are any errors. I paid special attention to the father's section, but she didn't change her expression and waited patiently for my process. Occasionally, she talked to the man standing next to her about a gift. The man who was talked by the woman didn't even nod properly. Or perhaps he couldn't. He was pale, trembling, and avoiding my gaze as if trying to escape.
I thought to myself, that makes sense too. Because this pathetic, trembling man is my husband.
I am Sarah, a housewife who has been working in the health bureau for 10 years. I didn't have children, but I had a modest wedding with David, who works in a trading company, and thought we would continue to live peacefully, quietly together.
That's what I believed. I started to sense something odd about my husband David after he passed his promotion exam.
His success would lead to a significant career leap at a young age, so David had been studied hard at home, and I supported him tirelessly while working. My efforts paid off, and I was truly happy when the results came. He was seen as a promising person among his peers. He started going to high-end clubs almost every week. It was for introducing clients, as told by his boss.
As David, it must have been the most attention-grabbing period of his life. Maybe he misunderstood something. When he returned from those glamorous and flashy places, the meals I cooked seemed too simple and poor to him, and he gradually started to look down on me.
Cheap chicken again?
My salary gonna be increased, so we could afford a bit more luxury.
At first, he would say like that, but gradually his words became harsher, and turned into criticism directed at me.
Switch to better meat. The meat was good on the celebration day, wasn't it? But I'm scared of buying expensive meat on regular days if I would be a mess it up.
Haha. Your cooking wasn't bad. It kind of feels like you're indirectly saying I don't earn enough, which I don't like. Of course, I never had such intentions.
I was living a normal life, and thinking that we needed to tighten our budget, especially when the salary increased.
One day, David finally said,
I can't even tell to the people what I'm eating like this. And he stopped eating my cooking.
When he got promoted, he used to say,
It's thanks to you, Sarah. I'm lucky to have such a wonderful wife. But now he had changed so much. Sarah, aren't you motivated for doing household chores?
Huh? What do you mean? I'm doing everything normally.
You haven't watered the plants outside. Weeds are growing, too. And I told you to wash the car, right? When are you planning to do it? You keep saying you're busy, but is your job at the health bureau demanding really? I always tried not to let dirty dishes or laundry pile up, but I just didn't have the time for the balcony plants. I couldn't get to weeding on weekdays, and washing the car took even more time. Plus, only David used the car, so it seemed unfair to leave it to me. David's one-sided and condescending remarks increased day by day.
He forcefully linked the household chores to my job and even started to mock the fact that I worked at the health bureau.
I remembered the days I desperately took the civil service exam and managed to suppress my frustration somehow. If you're busy, I'll eat out for a while. You don't have to do the household chores. Next week is our wedding anniversary. Do you remember the restaurant you used to book every year?
I had marked it clearly on the calendar. This restaurant was popular, slightly expensive, reservation only, which we had been going to since before our marriage. The old David would have booked it 6 months in advance.
Had that changed too?
When I timidly asked, David suddenly brightened up.
But the following words were shocking, so intense, I felt like my heart would shatter.
Ah, that place? Don't worry about it. I've reserved a seat.
But on that day, I just can't adjust my schedule with a client. And they told me to set up a meeting, so I thought it was a good place to introduce them.
Introduce?
What do you mean? I mean, I'm using the reservation for a business dinner. You get it, right? There's no point in forcibly celebrating on that day. It's my reservation, so it should be fine.
David said it so casually.
I was shocked but felt like I couldn't show my tears, so I just held them back.
That's not what I wanted to ask. I was astounded by David's behavior.
I didn't know how to put my feelings into words and faltered.
He looked at me with annoyance.
If you focused on the housework instead of your job at the health bureau, I'd be more motivated to come home and work hard. But if you can't even manage that, what's the point of working? Why don't you just quit?
It was true that I had been getting home late recently due to helping other departments.
I had no idea if David really wanted me to quit because of my supposedly inadequate housework, but he seems to just wanted to assert dominance and lash out at me.
Although my job was busy and the income was stable, it was important and I took pride in it. Despite David's harsh words, I had no intention of quitting. A few weeks later, I was working as usual. The Health Bureau's reception gets very crowded during campaigns and events. Although it wasn't my department, I helped out by speaking to visitors and conveying their concerns to the staff. Just then, a couple approached me, and the woman handed over a document cheerfully.
"Hello, we've come to submit a birth notification for our child."
It wasn't my department, so I couldn't accept it. I was about to tell the woman I'd check with the staff, then I saw the man next to her. And I was so shocked that I nearly lost my breath.
It was David, my supposed husband. Our eyes met, and he looked just as surprised and then awkward. "Could you check if there's anything wrong with this form?"
The woman, unaware of the situation, was holding out the form and waiting for me.
David's name was written in the father's section of the birth notification. "Congratulations. I'll have a check with our staff, please wait a moment."
I guided them calmly. I went back to check the counter and checked with the staff, but they were all busy. Additionally, they were so occupied and asked me to check if the necessary fields were correctly filled, even though they couldn't process it.
My mind was in turmoil. Should I have confronted David then and there? Did she know I was his wife when she approached me? I was just helping out with guidance today. It must have been a mere coincidence that I encountered them.
Thank you for waiting. I'll check for any errors now. Yes, please. I returned to them, maintaining my composure and acting as just a staff member. I guided them to a seat to review their submission.
I suddenly realized that the child's birth date was our wedding anniversary, and a pang of pain shot through my heart. I pressed my nails against my wrist under the counter to suppress my voice.
The woman's name seemed Emma. She's 24, over 10 years younger than David. She appeared like a gentle lady, with a calm demeanor. She was lightly but neatly made up, not looking at all like someone who had just given birth. Nor did she seem like the type to brazenly have an affair with a married man and face his wife.
Perhaps her lack of reaction was because she didn't know about me. It might take some time as we don't want any mistakes.
That's fine. David took the day off, and my parents are looking after my baby in the car. She answered with a smile. She talked about how much she loved her child, and described how the baby was small and birthed healthy. Obviously, David, sitting next to her, couldn't say anything and avoided eye contact with an awkward expression.
He must have found my composed demeanor puzzling. David had been staying away from home, and I had suspected he might have an affair.
But I never imagined he had fathered a child, so I took a deep breath to hide my realization.
"If you'd like, please call your parents over. The baby would feel more secure with mom nearby."
"Thank you, I was feeling a bit anxious." "I'll do that." Following my suggestion, she started using her mobile phone. David began to panic, but I pretended to check the form and stepped back to the counter.
I prepared the necessary documents and returned with 2 papers.
The couple looked in surprise. Especially Emma, who was visibly shocked. She stared at the unfolded paper, her face turning pale and starting to tremble.
"You haven't submitted a marriage registration, have you?" "We did submit a marriage registration. We are married."
"No, that's impossible." On top of the birth notification they had submitted, I placed an unfilled marriage certificate and a divorce form with my name already filled in. I pointed to the blank space for David's on the divorce form.
"Could you please fill this in, David? To start a new marital relationship, you first need to get divorced me, right?" It seemed they finally understood.
Emma glared at me and then turned a frightening face toward the man next to her. I also looked at David, who had turned pale.
"What kind of nerve do you have, submitting the birth notification of a child with your mistress at your wife's counter?" Before David couldn't respond to my strong questioning,
Emma stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair with a loud noise. She grabbed at David with a shrill voice.
"You deceived me? You said you were single, right? That we would marry because I was pregnant. David.
Of course, Emma had no idea he was already married. She had quickly seen through David's cheating personality and decided to have a child to keep him tied down. Not knowing he was already married. David, recently promoted and busy, had told his colleagues.
And he told his clients and colleagues that the fertility treatments had been undergoing. Despite he had no intention of divorcing me, it would ruin everything. So David had made up various excuses for not submitting the marriage certificate. I have work this weekend, let's skip it, or next time is Emma's dad's birthday, let's prioritize that. While he was making these excuses, Emma's morning sickness was worsened and leading to hospitalization. As she was in and out of the hospital, submitting the marriage certificate became the least of their worries. That's why Emma completely believed David's claim that he had already submitted the marriage certificate. There are many things to do after getting married. If one thinks about it calmly, like changing the name on your driver's license and bank accounts. But Emma, exhausted from her frequent illnesses and the major task of her first childbirth, hadn't considered these things. Her anger was exploded, and her face turning red with fury. Wait. What about the money I saved for the wedding? Did you spend it with this person? What? David, you borrowed money too?
I was shocked by Emma's question and hurriedly looked at David.
Don't stay silent, explain. We have a child, you know? You are always so talkative.
What about the money? Are you in debt to her? What did you use it for? David remained silent, not uttering a single word. It appeared that Emma had lent him a significant amount of money.
Of course, none of it had come into our household, and there was no sign that David had been living beyond his salary.
Emma was ignoring the other staff trying to stop her, and shook David for demanding an explanation and repayment. I didn't intervene, because I was considering it was also my concern. My feelings for David had already detached completely.
All right, I get it. You want a divorce, right? Then I'll do it right here, right now. I don't need you anyway. Are you satisfied now?
David, finally enraged and turned his face to red, hastily began to fill out the divorce form.
And Emma, you want your money back, right? You approached me when I started to succeed just because you're the daughter of an executive.
His attack then turned towards Emma, who had been crying silently.
How could he say such things to her, especially after she had borne his child? Just as I thought I should intervene. David caught his breath.
And he was staring intently behind her. I turned to look and saw there, a middle-aged couple with grim expressions was standing at the entrance of the health bureau. The woman was holding a baby and not moving. While the man, who was wearing high-end clothes, approached us with long strides. He seemed to be Emma's father. Emma was crying and rushed to the man who had just arrived. Likely they are her parents whom I had earlier suggested she call. Is what I just heard true? The man's low voice interrogated David, who visibly paled. I heard later that David and Emma had met at a dinner with clients. She was assisting her father, a senior executive, in a secretarial role. David was very taken with Emma's innocence, who had just graduated from college.
You seduced my daughter in a business associate and fathered a child, while being married to another woman? Is that true? I didn't invite you to the dinner to make Emma got to be this.
David was scolded with such fierce anger that he stumbled off his chair and fell to the floor.
Where did the money go that I prepared for the wedding expenses?
David, he was forgetting his defiance, and began to tear up and apologized profusely.
The disappearance of the wedding expenses turns out to be the compensation paid to David, another affair partner.
He was involved with a married woman, but they were quickly discovered, then it led to her divorce. The compensation demanded by the husband was paid off with this money.